Eyes front, SFC. We'll have time for sightseeing later. Fight is on. I'm almost done here. One less bad guy. 3 bad guys in range. Walker scratch 1. Blacking out. Scratch 1. Enemy forces eliminated. Mission success. No blips. Site looks clean.
Heads up, team. In this sun, they can see you as well as you can see them.
Got company, SFC. I count 2 of them.
Live fire, let's get active.
Site looks clear.
head out.
Drop is clean, sun is up. Ready when you are, leader.
All right, enemies in range.
Engaging. Live fire! Live fire! Status, advanced Mach 1. Bogey down, bogey down.
Enemy down.
Bogey down,
Bogey
one
terminated.
down. Site looks clean.
Drop looks clean.
Sensors reading
Let's
enemies.
get this over with. We've got live fire. 2 bogeys. Engaging enemy bogeys. Bogey is down.
Site looks clear, sir.
Systems damaged.
Time to engage.
The battle's ours, sir. Bogey down. Scratch 1 bogey.
It's an ambush squad there. Forget the crates and get the hell out of there.
Scratch 1. Add 1 to the list.
Man down. Zone clean. Charges set on the pink fuse, Commander.